Hello and welcome to the Intentional Brief, your weekly video update on the one big thing in cybersecurity news for growth stage companies, their investors, and management teams. I'm your host, Shay Colson, managing partner at Intentional Cybersecurity, and you can find us online at intentionalcyber.com. Today is Monday, October 7th, and while we're dealing with the impact of both Hurricane Helene and then preparing for Hurricane Milton as it intensifies into categories 4 and 5. We're also dealing with the digital equivalence of something that the Microsoft taxonomy has now called Salt Typhoon. So what is that and why does it matter to us, if at all? Let's dig in. This week, the Wall Street Journal broke an exclusive piece of news with yet another Chinese espionage operation. This one purporting to, quote, have penetrated the networks of a swath of U.S. broadband partners, potentially accessing information from systems the federal government uses for court-ordered network wiretapping requests. The Wall Street Journal goes on to note that for months or longer, the hackers might have had access to network infrastructure used to cooperate with lawful U.S. requests for communications data, and that this amounts to a major national security risk. They also said that the attackers had access to tranches of more generic internet traffic. Other reports frame this effort as a position within the service provider network that would offer valuable reconnaissance on how to further target high-value marks working for the federal government, law enforcement, manufacturers, military contractors, and Fortune 100 companies. This group has now been dubbed Salt Typhoon, and reports are that they had access to the networks of Verizon, AT&T, Lumen, and others for months or longer, and that this typhoon mechanic, again, comes from Microsoft's naming taxonomy of choosing a color plus a weather function, with typhoon designating Chinese state actors. I don't know what color salt is supposed to be. There's pink salt, there's iodized salt, I don't know. Anyway, Salt Typhoon is here. And the Wall Street Journal says that this hacking operation was discovered in recent weeks and involved a vast collection of internet traffic from major providers who serve businesses large and small and millions of Americans. The details actually get even more grim, with assertions that the surveillance systems believed to be at issue are the very same used to cooperate with the requests of domestic investigations related to both criminal and national security work. And it really ups the stakes. Politico this morning reported that compromising ISP's wiretaps is probably one of the most complicated and bold operations a nation-state actor can execute. It deals with extremely sensitive data and touches on both law enforcement and potential intelligence data. Some are even going so far as to suggest that since the FBI runs many of these wiretapping operations, that this is a counterintelligence operation where, quote, the Chinese are probably looking to close the gaps in their operations in the U.S., according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies' James Lewis. So while there is certainly a lot of attention-grabbing headlines around this and some juicy digital cloak and dagger stories, I think it does really beg the question for us here in the small and medium enterprise world of, so what? It's tempting to use this as a long philosophical case against backdoor capabilities, and there's maybe some good justification there, but that said, this is something that the telcos are required to provide by federal law, and the technical details of implementing such a service or capability, especially given the scale of these requests in a post-9/11 world, means that corners will be cut and shortcuts will be taken. And even more than that, we don't have a choice but to use these major telcos, even if we indirectly come up against them, right? Our data will typically transit these pipes regardless of whether our last mile or on-ramp, off-ramp pieces from another service provider, even something like Starlink, because that's the way the internet works and the way these backbones transit. That's also why this is such a high impact event to have happen to us. So I think instead of getting overly worked up about the things that we can't control, I do think it's a useful scenario for us in the SME space to talk through something with this assume breach mentality. Are there opportunities for end-to-end encryption here? Are there additional steps around authorization and validation that we would need to put into place if we assume that data transiting an untrusted channel is compromised? But at the end of the day, I think there's a larger game being played in which we're only largely unwilling and sometimes unwitting participant. I think for us in the SME space, this is yet another reminder to focus on the things that we can control and build towards a posture of resilience, where a compromise of one part of the operation won't grind the rest of it to a halt, or that compromises of particular components are limited to a risk that we can tolerate, right, that we've thought about and that we've calibrated for. Otherwise, it can seem overwhelming, or we can spend a lot of time and energy focusing on things that we simply can't control and simply can't change. From a fundraising perspective, we followed up a great week at the close of Q3 with another great week here to start off Q4 with nearly $29 billion in newly committed capital, including LGT Capital Partners, which is owned by Liechtenstein's royal family, posting $7 billion and change for their sixth global PE secondaries fund, and Summit Partners raising $9.5 billion in their 12th flagship U.S. growth equity fund. Again, both of which seem to be well-timed to take advantage of some of the macroeconomic headwinds and get in at a strong value proposition for the investments that they're going to make. Again, we're less than a month from the election here in the U.S., so expect some volatility, but the fact that we're doing back-to-back weeks of 25 billion or more is encouraging, to say the least. With that, a reminder that you can find all the links to the articles we talked about in the comment section below. You can find back issues and written transcripts of these videos at intentionalcyber.com, and we will see you next week for another edition of the Intentional Brief.